I think most people, when they see the name of your organization, they would think that it's all about play.
Yeah.
But like when I speak to you, I get it that it's not just about playfulness. There is holding space, sharing space, like empowerment, voice, and a lot of the themes that we're going to get into, right, through this conversation. So maybe to kick this all off, could you share with a listener who knows absolute zero about Playeum, what are some one or two good reasons why Playeum's work is important for Singapore today?
Oh, we're advocates of play, which we are.
Yeah.
But play is only but a channel.
Yeah.
Right, a channel. So is art, so is sport. And play is the reason why play for children is because play is the single most natural way they navigate their worlds, right? They learn about relationships, they learn about negotiation, they give and take.
Yeah.
That is said and done. I think what's important for Playeum when we first started was when the two mothers 15 years ago started Playeum was actually surrounding voice and agency, surprisingly, right?
Okay.
It was play as a channel.
Yeah.
So they set up all these interactive pop-up artistic spaces that allowed children to interact with them. And children would come and they would interact with each installation created by them and an artist.
Yeah.
And they would have different stories that came out of it. So you already know the muscles of creativity, critical thinking, even problem solving all would come up because it's a very hands-on thing. But the mothers were actually interested in voice and agency, allowing for a child to practice that muscle or even build that muscle or empower them even at some stage. What are your thoughts about this? What's your opinion, right? And what are your ideas around this?
Yeah.
I think at that time, voice and agency, and maybe even now, is not such an important or well-received outcome that Singapore would think, why give children voice? They already talk so much. Why do we need to give them more voice? I think so. We use a lot of play for the last 10 years in building 21st century skills, which is what play is known to build. Critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, resilience, self-awareness, or executive functions. I think Playeum now it's not beyond play, it's play and more. It's about holding space for a child to have his or her say, their opinions, their ideas, their thoughts around what matters to them. In the UN rights of children, many adults don't realize that children actually have rights, right? And one of the rights is the right to express themselves freely on matters that concern them, and adults are obliged to listen to them.
So it's like, if basically you're saying like that's what in the UN it says is the right of a child. Yeah. So it's like if your kid comes up to say like, I don't want to eat my broccoli, and you say like, shut up and just eat. You are like, it's a UN violation, is it? Except no one's going to enforce it.
No one's going to enforce it.
Yeah, but maybe unpack, like, because I know there's quite a lot of rights of children according to the UN, but what for you would be the top, I don't know, maybe the top 2 or 3 rights that people actually don't associate with, like, this is what every child's entitled to, according to the United Nations. Yeah.
I mean, the obvious ones was, of course, right to food, shelter, play. Play is basic need for a child.
The right to play.
The right to play.
So every parent who puts their child through 5 days of tuition is also a UN violation.
Saying that about tuition and, gaming, I don't think any of this is wrong or right. It's a balance. It's all in this sweet dance of between how you spend your time, right?
Yeah.
So having more enriched experiences or balancing your time with different things allows a child or a human being to have a more expanded version of growth. Because if you're only doing one thing all the time, you're only growing in one, your neurons are only growing in one direction or one way. So I remember going to my son's school, right? And the teachers were telling us that we're encouraging you to give your child much exposure to different forms of learning, right? If you can do music, but don't do music for excelling. Do music because it actually expands their neurons in a certain way, right? Do a sport. And in fact, do a few sports. They do not have to excel in football or in one sport and make it to the school team or the dance team. And the teacher was so unique. She told me, just let them try different things, because the more you try different things, you are expanding their bodies, their muscles, and their brain. I'm not a scientist, but the neural connectors in different directions. And it's great for a child. So again, nothing wrong with gaming or tuition, but if you're doing too much of one thing and there's an imbalance, your child's growth it's not there. So I detract from growth, but we were talking about holding space.
No, so I mean, as I'm listening to you, and like, why is Playeum's work important to the Singapore conversation, apart from like the UN children's rights thing, right? Which I know moves very few people out there. Like, okay, big deal. The UN's not going to send a bunch of peacekeepers to my house, I like the idea that you're bringing together these themes of playfulness has something to do with empoweredness, right?
Yes.
And the way you described it just now, like, if I take a playful attitude to, let's say, learning sports, learning Chinese, or learning whatever, music, right?
Yes.
There is an expansion of my awareness of what I'm capable of.
Yes.
Versus like if you made me learn it in a structured, not so playful way. So even if I can graduate with a grade 8 in music or piano kind of thing, I may not have graduated with an empowered sense of myself as a pianist.
Yeah.
It's more of like, okay, great. I know how to pass the exam well, but I don't necessarily feel like a powerful, playful pianist. Put me in front of the piano and I can't come up with something of my own. I can't express myself through the piano, but I can play other people's pieces. So that's how I'm sort of like starting to put together your whole, like, playfulness to me sounds a bit like not being so hard up on the structures or the path. Right? Being a bit like okay with it being a bit messy and dirty. And maybe that's also the path of empowerment. I don't know, like how do you put together playfulness and empowerment?
Before I answer, what does play mean to you?
If I had to keep it simple, the first phrase that comes to mind is like, play is about letting go of, maybe letting go of outcome, letting go of rules a bit, letting go of assumptions. Because you would have to be a bit inhibited to play. Because you can see it like kids in the playground, like when they don't feel like they want to play with the others, it's because they have a bit of, oh no, this person may not like me, or like, I don't think I can climb the thing as fast as everybody, so I'm going to sit this out. So they already learn, like, I'm going to extract myself out there. I can't play because I feel pressure to perform. Right? So performance is almost like the antithesis of play.
No, so when I was thinking of that question, right, I suddenly hit me that play is beyond a physical activity, which I knew but didn't articulate, right? Play is a state of being. Right? And for me, because, so language, words is my language of love. So words are a very powerful way of communicating love to myself and to others. So for me to be in a playful state of being is allowing my words, even not frowning, even putting a smile on my face as I speak, right, livens up my conversation with my son Jonas, right? And because he's older right now and there's a lot going on in his 12 to almost 13 life as an almost teenager, the precious sharings from a child is very important. What happens in school, because they spend most of the day in school, right? And generally when you come back from school, it's like, how was the day? Good. What do you do? Nothing. How was anything interesting that stood out to you? All the same. But when I almost engage, sometimes in the evenings after coming back from school, doing dinner, we have a a very light-hearted state of being, a playful, like there's a bit of joking around, there's a bit of humor, which is playful. A person or a child or even an adult is more inclined to warm up and open up. If I am mindful enough to be in a more playful, embracing attitude, maybe it's an attitude even, right?
Yeah.
Somehow, even conversations with my staff become more lighthearted and more flow.
Yeah.
Means more voice flows, more content flows, more discovery flows.
Yeah.
Like you discover more about the person's thoughts behind certain actions because you're in a lighthearted space. You're more welcoming, and when there's lightheartedness, there's more safety.
Maybe for a listener who is trying to track and follow this, like I'm still trying to understand like how does playfulness, this playful state of mind, got anything to do with my day-to-day life, right? So because you mentioned like, okay, there might be a team meeting, I may not necessarily be going in with a playful state. Yeah. But I think right now, if we don't get into a playful state, we're not going to go anywhere, right? So what would be an example for you of how you yourself as a leader try to bring in a state of playfulness? Yeah.
We run all these workshops where we warm up. The first thing we do is warm up with a physical movement or a playful movement, whether it's whether it's going around the table, tell me one thing you're grateful for this morning when you woke up. Yeah. Or from just like last Friday when we met as a team, right? Yeah. We all did like we played a song and we all took turns to do one move, right? So we do this regularly because we know research, movement, right? Laughter warms up your body and warms up your mind. And that's why if you attend any of workshops with any advocates of play, right? When you do a physical movement or voice singing or voice movement, even if it's just humming, right? Or even just a playful ideas going around your head, like a yes and game, like yes and it continues, right? Let's say a story of Shelley the elephant went to the forest, he fell into a ditch, yes and you continue. All this, I would say they're activities, but they warm up the body and the mind. When we do workshops with adults, right? When we play a few games or warm up activities, the conversations flow a lot faster. Okay. And the level of trust actually rises faster. There's someone, who was it that said, this is some famous guy, said that if you want to know a man, play with him for 1 hour, you will know him better than you would have known him in 1 year, right? Yeah. And that's the beauty of play. You really you create a bond.
The word that joins up play and power seems to be about freedom. Yeah. Right? Like I need to like set you and I free from our self-imposed or other people imposed on us like ideas of like what are we supposed to be doing right now, right? So that I can better explore new ways that work better for me. Yeah. Right? So like I was just reading about this systems change practitioner who was saying that it's vital for adults to have a conversation with each other, a playful conversation about what are the games you are playing right now. And he didn't mean like Monopoly kind of games, but the game that you are doing with your life and your work that someone else designed, and this game is not suitable for you. Yeah. Right? And he found that if people like, what are you talking about? He's saying like, look, everyone is playing to win something. Yeah. They are playing under some rules that they assume are like immutable. They're playing under some like structure, right? So for example, like let's say the game called career, right? We don't even know we're playing this game called career, but we all are, right? Yeah. And then some of us decide like, I'm done with this like dumb game of career and I want to go into like say the game of purpose, right? Yeah. And the game of career could be like the win of the game of career is called you win lots of money, you win lots of titles, and the rules of the game is you got to work every day in a job that you hate, right? versus like people who sort of like, that's not a game I'm interested in playing. But I needed to actually have a almost playful, irreverent ability to say, that's boring.
Yeah.
I want to do something else. Kind of like the way we see our kids decide, like, okay, I'm done with this game. I want to play another one. Yeah. But as adults, like, it can be really, really difficult because you feel so much emotional investment in like, it's supposed to be like that. This is called the game of how I get a house by 35, and I'm going to play to win, right? It's like, is this game like fun anymore for you?
Yeah, so this reminds me a lot of something I read. I listened to it. I think it's Simon Sinek. He said it's infinite and finite players.
Yeah.
And I really like that because so whenever we work with children or adults, right, actually a lot of self-reflection. So what kind of player are you, right? And I remember that finite players there's a goal. Everyone, as you said, plays to win or to lose, right?
Yeah.
So football, there's a winning and losing. There are rules. It's very finite. There's a winning or losing.
Yeah.
Monopoly. That's one kind of player.
Yeah.
But an infinite player plays to keep into the game, keep in the game.
Yeah.
Means that your journey of life is it's how you see it. I want to keep playing in the game of life or in the game of career. And I see where it takes me, right? I am not means at some stage, even in your infinite mind space, there could be finite goals. I ask myself, what kind of player am I in this life?
Yeah.
And the more as I work longer with Playeum, read, work with Common Ground, listen to wisdom from so many people, I see that how colorful our life is the experiments we do in every day, and coming from a space of openness, and experimenting about what if I do this? The what if is very powerful. So why I say this is part of play. I mean, someone listening to this might think, wow, they're going everywhere with this topic, right? But it is everywhere. If I'm mindful and I try to be as much as often, is I use the what if. Like, what if I tried this? What if I said this in a different way?
Yeah.
How would that generate a response?
Yeah.
And I always tell my team, sometimes our work is, we know the programs work, but sometimes we have to go on this journey where we experiment with, for example, the organization or the funder. Let's see where their interest lies. Do we hold space for their voice, their inputs as well? Because traditionally, sometimes certain people think my role is just this, right? For example, I want Playeum's programs. Playeum comes in, runs the programs. When the funding is over, we exit. But what if we play it differently? What if we go in and run the program, but involve the community around it and say, why don't you take over the program when we exit? What if we do it that way, right? And of course, someone will say, oh, but then you are not needed anymore. And I said, what if we played with the idea that as a charity, you need to work yourself out of a business, right? I mean, the idea that what if we really worked ourselves out of business, because then we have no more problems to solve. Because organizations like charities are set up to solve a problem, right? But what if we played with the idea that, what if everyone did it and we can do it now? We don't need you to do this for us. So I diverse, but having a playful way or attitude is like the what if we do this? It's playfulness, it's experimenting. And experimenting is fun for children. If you watch them on the playground, right? They experiment a lot, you know. And I don't know, I mean, when you hold space for that to happen, you hear not just ideas, but you see an abandonment of joy, or when the laughter happens, it's like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And there's so much lightness and laughter. And isn't life about having many memorable, light, happy moments? I don't know, life, maybe because I'm older now, I think life shouldn't be that hard, right? We tend to want to choose things that bless us, make us happier, lighter. Play is that. Playful attitudes and play is lighter moments, is happier moments, is when your child laughs with abandonment, or you're playing, talking to your husband or your wife, and you burst out in such like shaking laughter. How light is that? Don't you want more moments of that?
And it's only possible to invite yourself to play that game if you're willing to exit the previous game called the game of work until you die, or like the game of like, this is life and life sucks.
Yeah.
Right. So play until you die, unhappily. But, I guess like I kind of want to get you to share a bit about what are 3 major insights that you learned along the way doing your work with Playeum. Right, so I hear you recently wrote an annual report, right? And there's sort of like 3 things that you kind of want people to see. Yeah. About what does it take to be more playful and empowered.
Yeah. We thought a lot about in the last few years, right? What have we learned about ourselves?
Yeah.
I think reflection and self-awareness is a very strong and very important component and something we should exist as human beings, right? So the first point was around when we work with children, we're actually working with ourselves. I remembered my child before I joined Playeum, he was like 3 and he was in the playground and a lot of other kids and they were fighting and about sharing, right?
Yeah.
And I remembered intervening and saying that he must share because it's the right thing to do, right? And I remembered he was very upset. And after that, he was crying. And I went back home. I mean, he was 2.5 or 3. And I reflected that space I came from. Why didn't I support him in his learning journey about discovering what is it like to share? And if he didn't want to share, could we explore that option a bit more?
Yeah.
But what I did was I reflected that I was more concerned about what the other mothers thought of me. So you see what I mean when you're actually working on yourself. I was actually worried about what other mothers thought of me as, I don't know how to teach my son. So that was my driving force behind my behavior, not my son's welfare.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by, I feel when you work with children, you actually are working with your own self. So having the awareness to know what space are you acting from now allows me to make that decision whether I should go ahead with what I want to say. Should I hold back or should I say something else? There are a lot of playmakers who also experience when they work with children, there's a lot of self-reflection on the space they come from and also on the way they were brought up.
Right.
And whether it had caused any joy or trauma in their own lives and the way they are treating children now. I even work with Jonas, my son. I realized certain awareness of my own being hits me.
Yes.
Who I am, what space I come from a space of fear, insecurity, or anything. Yeah.
So let me bridge this to like a listener who may be thinking, okay, this is all about like parents and kids kind of thing, and this is not about me. If I can join the dots, like this larger national or cultural conversation about like, oh man, like Singapore or my company or whatever needs to be a lot more innovative, needs to be a lot more creative. We need to be a lot more like playful with our approach to products and services and all that, right? And what's getting in the way? And what Charlotte is talking about here is when we work for her insight was when we work for children, we're actually working on ourselves. But it's very similar to when we work with other people, right? And we find like, why can't I just take this easy? Why can't I just let go of this project, right? It's what's coming up with is a lot of our own unfinished business with the way we were brought up, the way we were told you must do this, you must not do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like when we do training for adults, right? And I train in the leadership and personal or team development space, right? Sometimes we do put in an activity where we invite them to use movement to just like use your body to express like a bit more of a flexible, adaptable energy, whatever that means to you. And usually most people will be like, okay, this is like a bit silly, but fine. They'll do something like awkward and weird and they'll have some laughs about it. But you will always notice there's at least 1 or 2 people in the room who suddenly freeze up because it suddenly occurs to them, they don't even know what to do with themselves in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like oh wow, they're like really bad or really underdeveloped. It's not that. It's a sudden realization for them that I actually don't know what that means. I don't know what it feels like to be a bit playful and silly and awkward. Yeah, and I think it's quite profound.
Do you not realize that why we have coaching is because I feel that a lot of situations around us mirror our inner space. Sometimes we always blame others for certain things. It's hard to blame ourselves. Oh no, he was like this. They did this to me, right? And I guess for myself, or even for our own work as adults, how am I contributing to this?
Yeah.
What can I do differently?
Like I think one of the most underrated kinds of coaching style questions that can be asked are very, very playful, irreverent, almost like silly sounding, not serious at all questions. And I usually use those as my last go-to if I feel a person is so stuck that if I asked him any more serious questions, they're just going to dig a further hole for themselves, right? So it's also an example would be, and if you're listening, like this is also about the whole like what does play have to do with empowerment and voice. So sometimes when I work with a coaching client, people come for coaching because they feel really, really stuck in a rut. My old ideas are my prison. I can't get free of it.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes you can ask them lots of really, really good questions and they are so clever to make the prison even tighter on them. You know, they have a clever answer for every question you ask. So I remember one particular client I had where like, he was dealing with lifelong cynicism. He couldn't get himself out of it, even though he knew it was damaging him. He was also because cynicism is about great intelligence. And he was very, very intelligent about locking himself further into that prison. Couldn't get himself free. So I was brought to like a limit, right? Of, okay, like I don't know what else to do with you. Let me just ask you stupid questions. And I would frame it as like, I'm going to ask you some really stupid sounding questions right now. Just play with me. Just play with me. Play with me here. Like, you know, like you have nothing to lose, right? You've already admitted like you're at your limit and none of the other sessions, serious questions are working for you. So I said, okay, just close your eyes and like, just don't overthink this and just play with me here. If your future was an animal, what would it be? If your future was a movie, what would it be? And I was just like throwing a whole bunch of spaghetti at him, right? And it was a very intentional, playful bunch of questions that would completely derail your thinking mind, right? And you know, you could tell like he would answer, but the answers were not, you know, like you can tell when a person's answering, like, yeah, you know, it's not sitting well with me. But like finally, like, when I asked him, like, so okay, if your future was a plant, what would it be? And like suddenly you can see like this, like the body reacted first. The body went into a slight, I don't think it was playful, but the body changed into like, because he started to really like work with the metaphor. He's like, I don't know. For some reason, I would say and he would describe this very flourishing, lovely plant. And this is like a very serious person.
Wow.
And like I was saying, like, okay, you I'm gonna pause you there and just get you to open your eyes and like, what just happened? And that was the key to like actually a useful, serious conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As the person unpacked, like, why did that image land in a way that never that he would have never dreamed of.
Yeah.
But he got there through play.
Yes.
And the willingness to take off the hat of cynicism for a short while just to like, fine, let's just play with this.
Yes.
Yeah. So I find that the playful questions can unlock surprisingly deep waters where your voice is.
Play actually uncovers voice.
Yeah.
And that was how we started, right? Play actually uncovers voice.
Yes. Yeah.
So no, you're right. And that was one thing, the first point. And the other one that we talked about was very much around
yes, I love your second insight.
That when we run programs, right, there is a difference between program deliverers and people developers.
Yeah.
So I think even whether it's a teacher or a facilitator or someone who works in a kids center? Are you a program deliverer or are you a people developer? And that is also self-awareness on the space you come from. Because a people developer would really be genuinely vested and interested in developing the child or the adult that you're working with. Right? So whether you're working in the office, I see our team, like anyone who walks through Playeum's doors as staff, my job is to develop you, give you as many opportunities to play, to experiment, to learn, to grow, hopefully providing the guidance, not only from me, but from people I can draw to support, right? And when you leave Playeum, you leave a person of growth, certain growth. That I feel is very important, right? So I feel that how do you see yourself as either a boss, a staff, a manager, a parent, a facilitator? Are you a people developer, or do you just deliver what you're supposed to deliver? I also think that when you are a people developer, there is an innate characteristic that can be developed, which is curiosity. Because curiosity allows you to understand, for example, from other people's point of view. Because you're really curious, like, hey, why does he think that way? Or like, why did she do that? Or it could be curious, like, what if I push this to the end of the table? What would happen? Or what if I dunk this in water? So curiosity allows lifelong learning, actually, right? It allows, and then this whole talk about lifelong learning. We're constantly learning, whether languages or whether they're learning new hobbies. And I admire it because it's this hunger and zest for life. My Uncle Kong once told me that if you want a normal, use the word boring life, or just a life, right? That's just mundane. Do the same thing every day, okay? But if you want a colorful life, right? Try to do as many different things as possible. And I realized that curiosity allows you to try many different things as possible, because your curiosity will lead you from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, right? And that keeps your mind alive. That keeps your heart pumping, as in the excitement, like, oh my God, I just discovered this. Did you know? And that's playful. I always remember this Chinese idiom called 画蛇添足. That's probably like the only Chinese idiom I ever remembered from my primary school. But it means about drawing legs on a snake or something like that, right? I mean, 画蛇添足. Okay, but it's like adding too much to something, right? That makes it look ugly, right? But I told myself, in life, experiment. If it's ugly, start again. Right? If my snake has legs and doesn't look good, maybe it's a caterpillar. I mean, the idea is to be playful. A lot of times we work with children from adverse backgrounds or challenging backgrounds, and when we play with them, a lot of stories come up of their own trauma or what's going on in their lives. And while we're not therapists, as playmakers, we can refer, of course, but we give them the space to share what they wanted to let us know. And this thing about name it to tame it, right? The more you can name it, the more you tame it. Even like journaling. Journaling is literally name it to tame it. It allows you to process what's ever in your mind. So by giving that time and space for a child to speak their trauma or speak what's going on in their minds, it allows a child to, in some way, process it.
And to also have power over it to some degree. Like
can speak.
I can manage this reality and I can name that reality for myself.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah. So like I remember when we did a circle time with Brave Feet, right, about certain one of the tragic incidents that happened in school. This was the River Valley incident. And allowing the children to talk about what anger was or what raging meant, right, was very powerful. And they could express so much. And it was interesting because all of them said that no one had asked them about the incident. Right? They were told about it. And they were told that they should go for counseling if needed. But this time we actually asked them what it meant to them. And they were very strongly that the boy must be very angry. So we asked them, what does anger mean? What? And then they said, he must be raging. And what does raging mean to you? Have you ever been very angry to the point of raging? And some of them said, yes, sometimes it's the point of no return. I thought that was very powerful for an 8-year-old to say, right? At the point of no return. And then we explored, when can you stop before you reach the point of no return? To me, that was something that as an adult can learn too. Coping mechanisms to not when is the point where you say, okay, this is the point of no return? I'm not talking about just anger.
Yeah.
I'm talking about anything that you do, that habits or, addictions even, right?
Yeah.
When you have point of no return, a trigger, what can you do to cope, to bring you back? I thought that was very powerful insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what I'm getting out of it is holding a playful space is not necessarily about, let's like bust out the Post-its and the toys and the Lego sets and all that. I mean, those are all of the possible tools you can use.
Yes.
But the fundamental mindset of holding a playful space is like, there's a bit of like, I'm giving you the freedom to express whatever is within you, and I might hold it with some lightness.
Yeah.
I'm inviting you to hold it with some lightness, and I'm not going to go in hard with my pre-assumptions of whether that's a right or wrong thing to say just yet.
Yeah.
Right? And because it's hard for people, kids as well as adults, like to find like a space where I can put my inner stuff on the table and not have someone like shoot it down. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Versus like, tell me more,
Yeah.
and it doesn't even be, tell me more. It could be like, say more about the details.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about like how like if you ask someone to describe their depression, right? And if you don't give them that space to share like what could be a playful picture, a picture that doesn't make sense, you don't allow them to like sort of play a little bit with like what's happening to them.
Yeah.
Like that. There's a very famous metaphor that this guy used about how his depression is like a big black dog that follows him. And he said that once he came up with that metaphor of this big black dog, it opened up his mind to possibilities of, if it's just a big black dog that follows me, rather than, it's a disease, it's something wrong with me, but it's just a dog. I can pet the dog, I can get to know the doggy, I can tame the doggy, I can tell the doggy to go sit in the corner.
Doggy is really quite cute.
Yeah, I can walk the dog.
Softer already.
Yeah, correct. So that playfulness, that permission he gave himself.
Permission to play.
To play with the idea of his depression.
Yeah.
Gave him a tool that no one else could give him. Because he was willing to play with something that looks very unplayful.
Yeah.
Like you can play with that, meh? But his analogy gave a lot of other people permission to like name their depression or name their woe.
Yeah.
Right? So it's I feel it's so important to try and connect the dots for the listener that like playfulness is not go playground, not play Lego. It's like can we look at even like some really, really difficult things and like just ask the what if?
Have a different lens to it.
Yeah.
It's not like you see like listeners who want to think that, this is going to be, I'm not a humorous person, right? I'm not like, you're going to laugh the way through the podcast, right? I'm not a humorous person.
Yeah.
But I will say I like to play with ideas.
Yes.
So I'm playful, but with ideas. But I know I come across sometimes as like, serious, because I'm a, I like to do things. I like to get things done, but I like to play with ideas.
Yeah.
And playing with ideas around, like you say, naming it. Let's say if something is a dog, right?
Yeah.
I see it as a big, beautiful plant that's swaying.
Yeah.
That's playing with an idea.
Yeah.
That I could be going with the flow, like swaying in the wind, right? Or petting the big black dog, and maybe he's even licking me and loving me. Yeah. So playing with ideas for me is, I think, what rocks my boat. Yes, and you're right. Play is not only a physical activity.
Yeah.
It's a state of being. It's an attitude.
Yeah.
And it definitely lends to warming up the soul and the heart and the mind, your somatics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've looked at the first insight is that when we work with other people, children or adults, we're actually working with ourselves. So we got to like take a look at what's this unfinished business from our upbringing. We looked at the second insight, which is like program delivery is different from like people developing, right?
Yeah.
You may be a program deliverer, but you also need to be a people developer at the same time, right? And that can look like if you want to bring in an atmosphere of play, either to a child environment or even to your work environment, it can't be just about let's design a playful program, right? But how do we develop people? How do we develop ourselves to go in with this like curious, inventive, I'm willing to take the Mickey out of like old rules and old games and old concepts that maybe don't work for us. Right. So let's land the plane on this third insight that you had in your from all your years of practice, right? And this third insight is every space created for children is controlled by adults.
Yeah.
Right. So say more about like that insight.
Yeah. So actually this came from Jody. Jody is our operations lead.
Yeah.
She also does a lot of the programs. She writes programs. And we were talking about this, right? And when she was explaining to me, I never thought about it in that way. Again, it's a perspective, right? But think about it. Every space created for a child, their bedrooms, the playground, their classrooms. Think about it. It's controlled by adults, right? Because essentially we feel that children are not able or capable yet to take care of themselves or those spaces. So in those spaces, they're quite often told what to do. When adults are around, when adults are not around, children may be a bit more free. Yeah. But the question we had was not an answer that we said, oh, it should be this way. But let's again experiment and be playful. What if spaces were co-created with children and adults? What if we created expansion and boundaries together? Right? What if children had a say over how they wanted to use certain spaces? And this goes a lot in this whole concept of space design, even for community spaces. Piran is a research network that Playeum set up when we first launched Playeum 15 years ago. Dr. Barbara Piscatelli was one of our contributors, and she looked a lot about spaces listening to children's voices about spaces also, right? And I think one thing I remember she wrote an article about, and she also told us, is warning us about tokenism.
Right.
So tokenism is we get the children to say what they want, but it's just for the sake of involving the children. Actually, we don't really not care, but they're just kids. They don't really know what they want. I mean, how would children know? It's true. I mean, sometimes we think about it. Sometimes they say things but are we able to listen to enough voices of children to read into certain patterns or thought trains that arise? Right? More so than listening to, I want this place to have a rocket launcher. It's not about having a rocket launcher, but it's listening deeper to what are the threads of thoughts around wanting this space to be, right? So even now, my son has, say, his bedroom. That's his space. We say it's his room. And now he's like, Mommy, you must knock before you enter. And don't knock and then open the door straight away. You must knock and wait for 2 seconds. So I can see the teenage in him coming out, right? But what does that mean to have that space in there? Because there's some things I also want a certain agreed upon boundaries for that room, right? Like, for example, if he has someone over, can he don't lock the door, right? Or maybe never lock your door because if anything happens, I can't get in, right? Certain things around there. So, so we ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to co-create a space with a child? Maybe it's sometimes more of the questions than the answers.
Yes. What's coming up for me is everything that Charlotte just shared about like, tokenism, about like, how do you co-create a space? Rewind that and now replace it with ground staff. Replace it with like, we should include those people. This plays out in grown-up systems as well. Right? That if we want to have adults who have a voice, who have agency, who are willing to take leadership and re-examine the structures we've been given, right? It really starts off with as young as like when you teach them like to navigate those boundaries of like, am I allowed to lock the room?
Yeah.
You know, how does mommy talk to me?
Yeah.
You know, how does she come at me with like power, but also a bit of lightness so that a real co-creation can happen?
Yes.
Yeah, and we don't teach that. Like that just plays out in much larger systems when you're much older, right? Because you've been taught a long time ago that it's no point bringing up my voice. I just play the game that people tell me to play.
When you lend in or lean in to something that you signed up for, whether it's a workshop or whether it's your company. I've signed up to be part of a company. If I can lean in to make a difference, right, whether through my ideas or voice or opinions, I'm more vested and I'm more ownership over the outcomes that the company has decided that those are the outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, you have more buy-in from your staff when they actually can contribute. Yeah. I think in Singapore, we are shifting a lot to include voices. We might not want to say it so openly, but the Forward Singapore is one example. I ultimately think that every human being needs to be seen, heard, and valued. That is the three very basic needs of a human being: to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. That fills our bucket. Eventually, that fills our bucket. Yeah. Makes us want to contribute, makes us whole, makes us complete.
Yeah.
When we are seen, when we are heard and valued, especially by people which are significant to us. Yeah.
There's sort of different ways we can wield power in any space that we hold, right? We can use power over, we can use like power with, and we can use like power for, right? So like power over looks like I know better, you don't. And I can say it very sweetly, but essentially it's still power over, like, darling, eat your peas, you know, or like just sit down and do that work because I know more than you, I know better than you. And while sometimes it's appropriate to use power over, you know, sometimes it's appropriate to use power over, but if you consistently do that, then what you leave behind is children / adults in the future who don't ever understand they have power within them.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas like the discipline is, can you like put aside your power over habits and once in a while like use power with and power for. And that can play out in terms of the way we talk, right? Are you talking over people? Because that's power over, right? Or am I talking with and talking for, right, the other, right?
Yeah.
So like rather than say like you need to like sit down and get this like spelling out of the way, that's talking over and power over, right? But talking with could look like, and in a playful way, which would be lightness, right? It could sound like, you know, I'm not a big fan of spelling either. You know, I would love for you to play your PlayStation. I also want to play PlayStation. Frankly, mommy also wants to watch Netflix. So let's talk this out right now. Like, what would be a fun night for you that still involves doing this spelling thing, right? And allow the person, like allow the kid, allow the employee to like unpack, you know, what it looks like. And talking for or power for could look like.
It's not that it's either it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's knowing when to wear different hats.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you are the teacher. Means I know. Teacher is a power dynamic, right? I know you don't know, so I teach you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's that because you may have more technical knowledge or experience that you can share.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a coach.
Yeah.
How can I ask you or hold space for you or invite you to share your wisdom?
Yeah.
And suddenly you realize that you see like the narrative of, you know, the guy with a plant. Suddenly he realizes, oh, wow. So the inner wisdom comes out. So it's your coaching, right?
Yes.
Or how can you, the next hat is a facilitator hat. How can you facilitate, you scaffold from someone's ability to a higher ability?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you try doing a little bit more of this? Just a little bit more, 1 more minute.
Yes.
And he tries it. Wow. When you did that, I noticed you can also do that, right?
Yeah.
Let's go that direction. So it's scaffolding.
Yeah.
So it's wearing different hats. That's why I said that leadership, right? We all lead. When I say leadership, I refer to it because your mother, you can also be a leader of the household, leader of yourself even, right? Everyone's a leader somewhat, leading either some projects, some parts of your work, some parts of your life, some people. Leadership is a moment by moment awareness, right? Knowing when to wear which hats, with who is your audience. And I think that someone said, oh, then very tiring for a boss. Imagine if he has so many staff, then you have to, it's easier if one style fits all. But I think when you work with each as a human being, as an individual, it shows your interest and curiosity about understanding that person and knowing that person and bringing out that best of that person. Like a child, every child is different. Every human being, every adult is different. So likewise for children, I mean, there are books on how standard behaviors, what you should do when this happens, when you want them to sleep by themselves and not, you should close the door. You should, there's so many ways, but you need to understand your child. Right? And understanding this little human being or even big human beings, that gives you power to your choices, of your own choices and how you engage with them.
We have to land this plane for the session, but I think the two things that are coming up for me is one, as an executive coach, I think what I've seen is the most profound and powerful changes a person can make is when they start being able to play with their identities a bit, because there's you can change your actions, and sometimes that gets you good results. But sometimes you realize you can't even change your action because there's something in the way. So you go another layer down the basement, which is, okay, let's change your thoughts. Because if we change your thoughts, maybe we can change your actions, right? And sometimes that works for people, and sometimes they still get really, really stuck. Right? Like Mr. Cynicism that I just talked about, right? And what he was jamming very hard was, it's not about the actions, not about the thoughts. There's something really deep, deep down in my basement of identity, right? There was just a fundamental way he was seeing himself, but he couldn't understand what was the thing that was getting in the way. So playfulness with identity can look like, for a while, just suspension of your seriousness. For now, you are not a leader. For now, you're not a professional. Maybe for now, you could be a plant. What kind of plant would you be? It's the most stupid, ridiculous question. But for a while, it just sets your mind free to wonder. And suddenly you can find that missing, oh, maybe it could be a this, or maybe it could be a that. And when I hear you say everyone is a leader, I can already hear some listeners' hackles going up. I am not a leader. I'm just a mother. I'm just a middle manager. I'm just a ground staff. And even that requires playfulness. What if you were the leader? If I gave you the keys to the kingdom to, let's say you were the king of Singapore, right? Or you're the king of this organization. Actually, what will you do? And then sometimes people will be like, oh, very easy. I'll do this. The funnest experiment I heard in a coaching book is lots of people hate networking because they have a fixated idea of who am I in the networking space. But he said he would always challenge every leader, go into a networking space and don't think of yourself as, oh man, now I got a network. Go from an identity space and what if for the next half an hour you were the host? What would the host do? And immediately the people would set free to I guess I'll make sure everyone has a drink. Good. Go. Get people drinks. And immediately they knew what to do with themselves in that space. And it's are we willing to play with the idea of who am I? And if I can do that, I wouldn't take myself so seriously. And I'll be invited to do a lot more things that are within me. And that's how I discover my voice in my agency, right?
I love that. In our workshops with Dr. Esther Juicer, and the what if, the question of what if comes very powerfully in all our workshops. It's a playful way of looking, what if I was the host? What if I decided today I'm just going to XYZ, right? If I wake up every morning and ask myself, what if today is going to be the day that I ... Right? Play with ideas. Play with the what if question is a very powerful question. Right? It allows us to imagine, right, and be creative. And these imagination and creativity are two very powerful, actually, components of 21st century skills, because we need creativity in all our, even our work or our lives. So I would say, let's play with what if. Like, what if today, what if today I didn't have to work? What would it look like?
Oh, even that would trigger some people.
I have to go to work. I have to go to work.
Yeah.
But what if it wasn't? It's work that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
In this boundaries of work.
Yes.
What would that look like?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so I think the last line I would give, and then we'll go into closing questions, is like, I mean, what's coming out very strongly for me is like, play is such an unexpected key to your freedom, right? Like that there's a prison of all ideas, all memories, all patterns, all systems, whatever. And the key to unlocking that is maybe just questioning, what if it could be different?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a light and fun way, you know?
Yes.
Okay, so Charlotte will have to like land this plane. Otherwise, like we can go on playing forever, like an infinite game, right? So our tradition is to close with like 3 fill in the blank questions. So for you, just go by instinct, play with it. Play with it. No need to be so serious. So Charlotte, for you, to be whole is to be?
Still.
Ooh. And the second question is a community that I am deeply grateful for who always makes me feel like I belong. What would that be for you?
My family and friends.
Oh.
Yeah, my family and friends are soul enrichers.
And the third and last one, do you have a song or a thing that is very much a part of you? And could you tell us what that says about you?
Oh my goodness, this is so funny because over the weekend I was listening to this song called Queendom.
Okay.
Not Kingdom, but Queendom.
Okay.
And this says about me, it's very vast, right? It says about me now in this phase in my life where I'm exploring, connecting to my feminine self.
Yeah.
And I'll say this in a short burst so we can land, but I wanted to, in the last few months, I wanted to connect with my femininity because I feel that I'm a great doer. I make things happen. I do a lot. And I think that comes from a very masculine energy, testosterone-driven space. So you need a lot of testosterone to do, right?
Yeah.
And all of us, men and women, have masculine and feminine sides of us.
Yeah.
So I was in this pursuit of connecting to my feminine self. And what does that mean? So I was listening to this song called Queendom, which talks about this queendom of women and femininity and what does that look like. It's on Spotify if you want to listen to it.
All right.
I'll send it to you.
Sure. Thank you so much,
Thank
Charlotte,
you so much,
for this playful conversation.
Yes, it was wonderful.
I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.